Hello and welcome to Solely Singleton, episode 188. I'm your host, Eric, and with me I've got guest host, the caretaker of Cthulhu himself, Cavs. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good, Eric. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, this is a fairly special set review, so we're doing a postmortem on double feature, so that's Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, right?
Yeah, and I'm excited to be on this because I have not actually yet been able to talk about Midnight Hunt on the show. I was here for Crimson Vow, but sadly missed Midnight Hunt, which is the far better half of double feature.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, you missed out on the good one, so...
I did. But thankfully I got to talk about blood tokens.
Woo, yeah.
Spoiler alert, not going to be talking about those today.
I guess with that excitement, we can kind of get into this.
Yeah.
All right, Cavs, since you've been on previously, so longtime listeners probably know what's going on here. But for those of you who are new, why are you on this cast, and what's your cube like?
That is a great question, Eric. I'm on this episode because I run a cube called the Cube of Cthulhu. You can find that on Cube Cobra. The cube ID is Cthulhu, CTHULHU.
There should be a link in the show note.
Yes. And yeah, it is a horror-themed cube that draws heavily from the 3 Innistrad blocks. I also pull in other relevant, flavorful cards from other sets, so you'll see things from Ravnica, you'll see a lot of stuff from Eldraine. I'm regularly updating it, got a couple cards that are coming in from the newest Phyrexia set. But I'm here just because these are cards that I've had a lot of experience playing with. Most of my cube is coming from the various Innistrad sets. So Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow make up a large portion of my cube, and these are cards that I've had quite a bit of experience with. So have a lot of familiarity in talking about them.
And I think this is the Innistrad theme is one of the more common theme orients of cube. So you're not alone, and I think others will be able to take there's information from this other person that runs a cube that's in the set theme of, horror and Innistrad, so.
Yeah, if you go into the cube map on Cube Cobra, there's definitely a little spooky island that's just filled with lots of different variations of Innistrad cubes. It's a very popular gimmick cube that you can find. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, something that you want to build, or something that you've been working on, talk about some of these cards with a little bit more relevance towards what you would have in that card pool.
Awesome. Do you want to start Midnight Hunt, or do you want to real quick smash through the shittier version?
Let's go through Crimson Vow first. Let's just get that out of the way.
Okay.
Scrolling way down in the document. All right. Page 19.
There are a couple cool cards from Crimson Vow, and I think this first one is one that I'm pretty excited for as well.
Yeah.
All right, so first up, we've got Welcoming Vampire, 2 and a white for a 2/3 vampire with flying. Whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is actually a really cool card and does quite well in the White Weenie deck.
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. It seems like every time we go to Innistrad, we get a version of this card. So it started with Menor the Meek,
which was a cool card at the time.
It was. I ran that card happily for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then second time through Innistrad, we got Bygone Bishop, which was similar to Welcoming Vampire in that it was a 2/3 flyer. But instead of just straight up drawing a card, you would investigate.
I mean, it was always one of those, I like clues, but is it really good enough for what we're trying to do in this White Weenie deck?
No. It never was for me, at least.
Yeah. But Welcoming Vampire, on the other hand.
Yeah. This is the perfect version of this effect, I think. There's no added cost. There's the downside of it only triggering once each turn. But honestly, as I've seen this card play, I've never really seen where that is actually a problem.
Yeah, and okay, maybe it happens once a game, maybe twice a game. Pretty unlikely, but okay, that's not actually that big of a downside because you're still getting the draw trigger from the first one. And you've made the decision that playing the second creature is more important than getting a draw.
Right.
And this is on a solid body for what you're trying to do in White Weenie. Like 2-power flying? Sure.
Yeah, I've been really, really impressed with this one. This card's pretty solid.
Okay. With that out of the way, what's the next card you want to bring up?
All right. Up next, we're moving to blue. We have Thirst for Discovery. Thirst for Discovery is 2 and a blue for an instant, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a basic land card. This one is just a solid take on Thirst for blank cycle that we've seen over the years.
Right.
Drawn 3 cards. In my cube, sometimes I actually want to discard the 2 cards. I've got a lot of flashbacks, so sometimes you can get value by just chucking those cards into your graveyard. Have a lot of madness in my cube, too.
Right.
Not too much in blue, but you could use this as a madness enabler, as it's pretty easy to splash into, a Grixis deck, which is where you would probably find more of the madness type cards.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those, like, any of the thirst for these have shown that they're good in cubes that are taking advantage of discarding 2 being a potential benefit.
Right.
If that isn't the cube, like, if your cube is not designed to be able to take advantage of discarding 2 as a benefit, you have basically no interest in any of the thirsts.
Yeah, doubtful. And yeah, I think of the ones that have been printed, I think this is probably the most generic one.
Yeah.
So, unlike Thirst for Knowledge, where you have to discard an artifact to only discard one, discarding a basic land card seems like that's probably fairly easy to get.
While I agree that this is probably one of the more generically useful thirsts, it still needs to be in the cube that's able to take advantage of discarding 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough because, like, Brad has gone a bit deep onto his cube for these types of things with, like, Vengevine. So we've kind of skewed our internal testing results on that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it does its job well, I think, for what it's trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. Solid card.
Okay, we can move on to an interesting little card. This is Mirrorhall Mimic. 3 and a blue for a 0/0 spirit with you may have Mirrorhall Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. It also has Disturb for 3 blue, which is you may cast this card from your graveyard transformed for its Disturb cost. The backside is Ghastly Mimicry, which is an enchantment aura, enchant creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. If Ghastly Mimicry would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead.
I absolutely love this card. Ghastly Mimicry, if it's not answered quickly, can just really snowball out of control. What I really like about this is that this also has the advantage of I run a lot of self-mill in my cube.
Yeah.
So the fact that I can disturb this out of the graveyard to copy whatever the best thing on the board at that time is really, really relevant. I am probably casting Ghastly Mimicry almost as much as I'm casting Mirrorhall Mimic, just based off of what my cube is doing. And a lot of those self-mill decks, the problem they run into is that they have to simultaneously fill their graveyard to get whatever value they're getting from the graveyard, but also slow down the board state and just gunk the board up.
Right.
And Ghastly Mimicry lets you do that.
Actually a pretty interesting card.
Yeah, I think it is probably a touch slow for it to be like a blanket recommend to everybody, but again, I think this is something where if the self-mill thing is something that you're pushing, this is a really interesting card to take a look at.
Okay, next up, you want to talk about Sorin.
Yeah, I'm going to eat my words from the hot takes on this one. Up next, we have Sorin the Mirthless. Sorin the Mirthless is 2 black for a legendary planeswalker Sorin with +1. Look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. -2. Create a 2/3 black vampire creature token with flying and lifelink. And finally, -7. Sorin the Mirthless deals 13 damage to any target. You gain 13 life, starting loyalty of 4. I whiffed on this card in the hot takes real bad. Yeah. I remember when we were talking about this card a couple months back, I remember my big complaint was, I really wish the +1 actually did something.
Right.
Yeah. I very much undervalued how good that +1 can be. It's just like a good kind of generic black planeswalker.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a 2/3 flying lifelink token is pretty big token, all things considered.
Is.
Like, it sucks that, like, it's a -2 and he only starts at 4, but, like, you're getting some decent value out of it.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy with how this card plays. The play pattern I'm usually finding is I'm playing Sorin, I'm making the vampire, I'm gaining some life off the vampire to offset whatever I'm drawing. And then depending on how the board state looks, maybe I make a second vampire, or maybe I keep trying to dig my way into that +7, which I've pulled off. That'll win a game.
Yeah, I mean, 13 damage is 13 damage, but...
Yes. It's a bad Bob that can kind of gain you some life back.
Yeah, and you did say something about the art being cool.
Oh, yeah, there is there's an alternate art version done by
I was going to say, I was like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, not sure I agree with you.
No, the the non-promo art, Soren's looking a lot like Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, which I think of every time I see this card. But no.
I hate the fact that you've said that, and I'll never not see that now. Because it looks exactly like that, like trying to be cool Jay.
Yep, lean it up against the door of the convenience store.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I just want to see someone alter like Silent Bob next to Sorin on the other side of the door on the regular art.
Yeah, or convert the background into like convenience store. Alright, let's move on to Chandra, Dressed to Kill. 1 red for a planeswalker with 3 starting loyalty. +1, add red, Chandra Dressed to Kill deals 1 damage to up to 1 target player or planeswalker. +1, exile the top card of your library. If it's red, you may cast it this turn. -7, exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast red spells from among them this turn. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a red spell, this emblem deals X damage to any target, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. This one is kind of neat. The +1 actually means that, like, as a 3-drop planeswalker, you're kind of able to cheat on the mana a bit. I'm not completely sold, just because I have my own favorite 3-drop Chandra, but...
That's very fair.
Have you been able to get any testing with this one?
I have. Here's how I would sell it to you, Eric. What if I told you that this is not a 3-drop Chandra? That this is a pseudo 2-drop Chandra? What then?
2-drop planeswalkers are either really good or utter garbage. So
I was going to say, you got this, you got Tibalt, and you got Ren and 6.
Yeah.
She's better than Tibalt.
I can accept that quite readily. She does something.
No, in all seriousness, like, this was a card that I remember when I was looking through Crimson Vow for the hot takes, I didn't think twice about.
Yeah.
Then I started playing this in Constructed, and I realized, like, this card is actually pretty solid in a probably more mid-power kind of red aggro deck.
Yeah, I do think that there is something interesting about some of these cards in red that really push, like, the mono red, smash you in the face kind of thing. Like, I had a lot of fun with Torbran, which was, like, red, play red. And... I mean, I can kind of see, like, Chandra Dressed to Kill doing the same kind of thing of, like, yeah, it's not going to be great in the other decks, but this is a reason to play mono red.
Yeah, you're right. She is absolutely a mono red planeswalker. That's how I've played her, and that's where I've been really pleasantly surprised with seeing how well she has played in that deck.
Yeah, and, I mean, not every cube's going to want to push mono red as an option, because...
Right.
Historically, it's always been something that's, like, easy to put together. So, that's just one of those things. But I do think that going forward, there will be cards like this that kind of push interesting mono red.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I think we've got a werewolf up next.
Oh, we do. We have a good werewolf up next. Up next, we have Volatile Arsonist. Volatile Arsonist is 3 red for a 4/4 human werewolf with menace and haste. Also has whenever Volatile Arsonist attacks, it deals 1 damage to each of up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target player, and or up to 1 target planeswalker. This is the daybound side. It also has a nightbound side. Nightbound is Dire Strain Anarchist. Dire Strain Anarchist is a 5/5 werewolf with menace, haste, and whenever Dire Strain Anarchist attacks, it deals 2 damage to each of up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target player, and or up to 1 target planeswalker. So before I talk about this card specifically, just to quickly touch on the whole Daybound, Nightbound thing, because this will come up as we're talking about some cards in Midnight Hunt too.
Yeah, that was like the whole, this is the new werewolf.
Right. It's the new werewolf thing. Initially, I was a little disappointed that they don't play well with the old werewolves.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of hate that, like, not only do they not really play well together, they're just kind of confusing on, like, if you're new to, like, werewolf synergy, you're like, okay, which one's doing which?
Yeah, it's annoying. I've personally just chose to kind of avoid all of that confusion by having them mixed by just moving 100% to the Day and Nightbound werewolves, which thankfully they are almost categorically across the board better than any of the old werewolves that are printed. I will say that I am probably evaluating these cards closer to their ceiling because I run enough of them where there is a non-insignificant number of times where I'm casting this on curve on the Nightbound side because it's already night because there have been other werewolves played earlier in the game.
Right.
These cards get better the more of them you play. So if you're just playing one, it's going to be a little bit worse than if you've got a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
They have made the werewolf deck go from being by far the worst deck in my cube
yeah,
to a completely respectable, solid deck that when built well, can win and can play quite well.
Nice. I mean, that's good to hear.
Oh, it is, yeah. Which I'm so happy about because, like, there's always someone at the table who is super happy to draft werewolves because it's like, yeah, this is cool. This is this cool gimmick that I never get to do.
Right.
And, like, up until these last 2 sets, in the back of my head, I'm like,
don't.
I'm
Please
sorry. Don't. Yeah. Like, maybe you'll figure out how to play it because I haven't yet.
Yeah, nobody's yet figured this out, but
right.
Have fun.
But these new ones, like, Daybound, Nightbound is just a solid upgrade because it makes it so much easier to flip them.
I agree. It makes more sense with the Daybound, Nightbound, and if you're playing more of them, it works better.
Mm-hmm.
On that, I mean, if you're able to play this 5-drop in the Nightbound, that seems like...
It's dumb, man. That's a good card.
Really good, right? Like,
yeah.
5/5 menace haste that does 2 damage when it attacks.
Yeah, which helps the menace part. Because, you know, hey, maybe you kill one of your opponent's, like, chump blockers, and now they only have 1 creature to where they're going to take 5 to the face, but they've already gotten shocked because this could hit a player, too.
Yeah.
It can hit a planeswalker as well. You know, it's a 5/5 menace haste that can potentially shock 3 different targets every time it attacks.
That's very good. Like, that's just a very strong card to be able to play it in the Nightbound mode.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to do that, this card is dumb. But even in a theme cube like yours, you're not guaranteed.
No.
So the front half, the Daybound, still needs to be decent, right?
Yeah, and I think for this one, I would say the front half is decent. I don't think the front half is going to excite anybody who has, like, a traditional powered cube or anything like that. But for me, where my cube plays like a much more mid-level powered cube, that front half is pretty respectable.
Your evaluation of this is this card's just good.
Yeah.
In your type of cube. I think it's fine, even in a general cube. It's tough because comparing it to, you know, your 5-drops in red, generically, your dragons.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's real tough.
The only other downside I'd mention to this is just Daybound and Nightbound is kind of annoying to keep track of manually in paper. That's a complication, but, like, at this point, especially now that you've got things like Monarch and Initiative and
it's
Dungeons,
not
like
that much. Like, if it's actually going to be coming up, I don't think it's that big of an annoyance, really.
No, and I would think at this point there's enough of those outside things where people are used to keeping track of something like that.
Yeah.
Like, the complication comes in if you're mixing them and you have
all
4 of them, you know, like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got one more?
We do have one more.
So, last up, we've got Ulvenwald Oddity, which is 2 green for a 4/4 beast with trample and haste. And you can pay 5 green to transform Ulvenwald Oddity to Ulvenwald Behemoth, which is an 8/8 beast horror with trample and haste. And other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. It's big.
It's big. It's fast.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. When I saw this card spoiled, the first thing I thought of is like, oh, we have Questing Beast at home. Which it kind of is.
Yeah,
it's just a more simple, streamlined version of it.
It doesn't have the other random shit.
Right. This is a version of Questing Beast where I can actually remember from memory what it does. It's 4/4 trample haste.
Yeah.
The transform ability is nice. It's really overcosted. So, 7 mana is a lot.
It is.
It'll close a game out, though, at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you transform it, you're expecting to probably win the game if they don't have the immediate answer. And
right.
7 mana is a lot, but it's not an unreasonable amount for ramp-oriented decks.
No.
It's just a bit weird because, you usually don't play just generic 4/4 trample haste in a ramp-oriented deck. But even the, more, red-green beat you in the face smash kind of decks have some ramp in them. You're playing green, you're going to play some amount of ramp.
Yeah. I kind of look at this one again similarly. If you're in a flavor cube like mine, yeah, you want this card because it's kind of our big stompy green thing. But I think this also has a home in kind of more medium powered cubes where, maybe Questing Beast is too much. This card does what it needs to do. It's big, it's dumb, it stomps things, it's fast, and it can close a game out if it's left unchecked.
Which, yeah, I mean, you sometimes need a few of those.
Yeah.
So, I think that closes out VOW. There was no commander parts of that, so we're on to the good part. We're on to Midnight Hunt.
I am going to apologize to anybody who is hoping to hear us talk about blood tokens or cleave, because we're not going to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I completely forgot about cleave.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I think that is probably the worst mechanic that has come from any Innistrad set, which is impressive because Shadows over Innistrad gave us Skulk, which is also pretty awful.
It was pretty bad. But blood tokens.
Yeah.
I've thought that they were always terrible, but you're saying they're not even good in a theme cube that might be able to take advantage of it.
No. Around hot takes, I was a little bit more optimistic about them because red-black in my cube has a lot of madness. So I was looking at blood tokens as kind of it's a way of enabling madness.
Yeah.
The problem I have with them is that the cards that create the blood tokens are so overcosted and so inefficient at the rate in which they make them. There are almost no blood token cards that I ever want to actually play, and there's just a better alternative somewhere else.
Yeah, you're looking at blood tokens as an enabler, but you don't want to have enablers that are trash.
Right, I don't want an inefficient enabler, but they're inefficient enablers, and the fact that I have to pay to crack the blood token kind of defeats the purpose of madness, because madness is a way to get something out generally cheaper, but I'm now having to pay a 1-mana tax every time I do that.
Yeah,
it's also great. It's a rummage, not a loot, so I have to have the madness card in my hand. I can't maybe draw into it and then be cheeky and then discard it. It's
yeah.
I think I have 2 in my cube overall.
Okay. Managed to make a couple into it, but
right, and those are usually because they're good in another purpose or they're filling another slot.
Or the blood token itself is not why it's there.
Right.
That's fair.
Yeah, the one I was most optimistic about was the 1-drop Voldaren Epicure. It was the 1/1 that pings all your opponents and makes a blood token.
Yeah.
I remember I saw people jokingly calling it Red Thraben Inspector. That card sucks. It's so bad. I cut that immediately just to bring back Insolent Neonate, just because that card does more things. And it enables madness for free.
I kind of like Insolent Neonate, so I can see that cut being right on.
Right, it's I get the madness enablement, but it's free, and this card doesn't suck. I can throw some equipment on it, and now I've got some kind of menacey dude. Super disappointed. I think of these 2 sets, the biggest miss is just how the vampires in the quote-unquote vampire set were handled.
With that disappointment out of the way, though, we can move on to the more exciting portion of this postmortem.
Yes.
We're into Midnight Hunt, and do you want to start out with a solid card?
Yeah. Up first, we have Cathar Commando. Cathar Commando is 1 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier with flash. It also has 1, sacrifice Cathar Commando, destroy target artifact or enchantment. This card is super good. Sometimes you just want a 3/1 for like an aggro human deck. You've got a 3/1 aggro human deck. Flash means that this can also be used pretty efficiently on defense as a way to kill an attacker. 3 power is going to kill a lot of things in my cube.
Ambush Vipers kind of still work.
Yeah. And then it's got that whole main deck sideboard kind of mode tacked in where I can also use it to get rid of a troublesome artifact or enchantment, which in my cube I do have a lot of because I try to support Delirium, so there's a lot of artifacts and enchantments in my cube. So this is just super flexible, really versatile. Even its base state, 3/1 flash, solid.
Yeah.
It's just a good card.
Okay, we're going to move on to one that I love. So this is Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. 1 white for a star 4 legendary human knight with vigilance. Adeline Resplendent Cathar's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. Brimaz, you suck. You've always sucked. Go away. Adeline is here, and I never need to see you again. Not really. That's a bit far, but I do like Adeline's play pattern for what it's going to do substantially more than I do Brimaz. Adeline fixes all of the tempo-oriented problems that I had previously because of how whenever you attack, you get the token. It's not Adeline has to attack or Adeline has to do something. It's like, no, you played it, and you're swinging with your other white weenie stuff. You're making a 1/1. Like, it just works better for the decks that want it, honestly. And I assume that this works very well in the theme cubes as well. Like, generally ones that are like really good in an unpowered cube would probably be good enough to the point of like, is it too good?
Yes. This card lasted 1 draft, and I cut it because it was absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to the last episode I was on, I talk a little bit about my struggles with balancing white in my cube, how that has always been, I think, surprising to some people. It's been the strongest color in my cube by a pretty wide margin.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because you pull from every set, not just Innistrad, and there are usually thematic themes in white for other sets that like are close enough to the horror theme that like you can put it in.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide card pool, and then the whole human tribal and then green-white +1/+1 counters. Like that deck is just super strong.
Right.
This card very much kind of tipped that over the balance, exactly for the reasons that you were saying. It's extremely good. This card, super good.
It really does feel like the Rabble Master, but themed in white.
Up next, we have Brutal Cathar. Brutal Cathar is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier werewolf. When this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Brutal Cathar, exile target creature an opponent controls until this creature leaves the battlefield. So this is the Daybound side. It also has a Nightbound side. Nightbound side is Moonrage Brute. Moonrage Brute is a 3/3 werewolf with first strike. Also has Ward, pay 3 life. This is a really interesting card because if you go back to what we were talking about, the last werewolf we talked about, this is actually an example where I think this card might be a little weaker in my environment because there are so many other werewolves than it would be in a more traditional cube. Because this is a card where I almost always want to cast it on the Daybound side to get the Fiend Hunter exile effect. I generally am not super interested in casting this on curve on the Nightbound side. Like, 3/3 first strike, Ward, pay 3 life. That's okay.
It's solid, but like the decks that you're drafting Brutal Cathar, is that really what you're expecting to want?
No, you want the removal aspect of it.
Yeah.
So generally, this card, oddly enough, I think this hits its ceiling a little less often for me, just because there are times where you're casting on the night side and you're desperately trying to flip it to remove a problem.
Yeah, okay. So it does still work because it's got the or transforms into. Okay.
Right. But the true ceiling of this is if you can get this to flip multiple times, which there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through to get to that, but this could potentially exile 2 things, or potentially 3. And then, if it's on the Nightbound side, it's a little bit more painful for your opponent to remove. And unlike a Fiend Hunter, you can swing with Moonrage Brute a decent amount of the time.
3 power and first strike is pretty nice. And again, like, even if they're going to try and do something like, oh, you swung, I guess I'll have to kill it. It's like, okay, cool, take 3 life. Like, But, yeah, I mean, for general cubes, I can't really recommend it. It's not a noticeable upgrade over the other options that we have for the potential annoyance. But, okay, Brutal Cathar.
Yeah, it's an interesting evolution of Fiend Hunter. It's up to you if you want it or not.
Okay, let's move on to Intrepid Adversary. Intrepid Adversary is 1 and a white for a 3/1 human scout with lifelink. When Intrepid Adversary enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white any number of times. You may pay this cost 1 or more times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many Valor counters on Intrepid Adversary. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each Valor counter on Intrepid Adversary. It's got multikicker.
It does.
So yeah, I mean, this is a pretty strong card. It's not, for general cubes, I'm going to say that it's not a slam dunk. We're in a 2-drop white section. We have a lot of options that's good in cube, I guess. This one has some benefit of like, oh, it's got lifelink, so like if you're able to swing in or you really need to block it, like that's kind of neat. That's not so much, but having the Anthem ability is pretty nice. It's not that unreasonable to just pay 4 mana to get your Anthem with a dude.
Right.
It's not that uncommon.
No, and that Anthem ability is why I had to cut this card after the first draft. So this is the other card that I cut to power real quick.
For the same reasons of it's white, it's human, it's just not really balanced around like strong board wipes happening.
I've also started to introduce a little bit more proliferate into the cube, just because I do have a lot of +1/+1 counters, which with this, again, that's a corner case interaction. But proliferating Valor counters to make your Anthem effect greater, it's just too much for me. I don't think this card is like power cube power level. I think this is just a very unique, specific to my environment. This card is just too good in a color that's too good.
I think that's fair, but it's still a solid 2-drop option.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of solid 2-drops options,
yes,
we can move right into this.
This is going to be a very quick one to discuss because it's just a solid card.
Yeah.
Up next, we've got Fateful Absence. Fateful Absence is 1 and a white for an instant. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller investigates.
Cool.
It's good removal.
So, I mean, we've had similar things with Declaration and Stone where it's like, the clue is annoying.
Yeah.
But you're making the decision knowing that, like, this thing needs to go away now. I'll deal with what they get later. So, it's good enough. Sure.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I actually don't run this card. I'm instead running Declaration in Stone, which is the sorcery version of this.
Right.
But I'm running that because that will destroy all creatures that have the same name. Yeah. So I'm using that as like a way to answer tokens.
But we can move on to Suspicious Stoaway. This one's kind of neat. So Suspicious Stoaway is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 human rogue werewolf. Suspicious Stoaway can't be blocked. Whenever Suspicious Stoaway deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card. On the day-bound side. The night-bound side is Seafaring Werewolf, which is a 2/1 werewolf. Seafaring Werewolf can't be blocked. Whenever Seafaring Werewolf deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So the night-bound. Holy shit, Seafaring Werewolf is difficult to say.
Yes. If you want, we can just start calling this Sifu Werewolf.
Sifu, yeah. I mean, this is Lunar Ilkor.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Lunar Ilkor. So, like, this is a cool card to me. But I'm sure that there's a bit more play for your thematic cube kind of thing. But just ignoring theme, Lunar Ilkor is cool and Suspicious Stowaway is cool. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about this card. It's a really cool evolution on Lunar Core. So, kind of like how Brutal Cathar is an evolution on Fiend Hunter. I also just really love the fact that, like, Midnight Hunt gave us these off-color werewolves to where I now can have werewolves in 5 colors, and, like, they all do interesting things.
And it is even more interesting when you bring that up of, like, werewolves previously were just, like, dumb, smash you in the face, ha ha ha.
Mm-hmm.
But now we've got, like, these, like, I'm not going to say they're, like, super interesting, but there's more interest on, like, the blue werewolf is doing, like, looting stuff that can be blocked. And, like, it's following the themes that you would want to do in those decks, but with that little twist. And I like that.
Yeah.
I think the next one is also an interesting card that you'll like.
All right, up next we have Poppet Stitcher. Poppet Stitcher is 2 in blue for a 2/3 human wizard with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Decayed is it can't block. When it attacks, sacrifice it at the end of combat. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more creature tokens, you may transform Poppet Stitcher. Poppet Stitcher transforms into Poppet Factory. Poppet Factory is an artifact with creature tokens you control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may transform Poppet Factory. I really, really love this card, which I think
cool.
might be contentious because I think a lot of people see Decayed and immediately think this card sucks, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those that, like, I don't like Decayed. I think Decade's pretty bad. I think this one's kind of neat. Just because, like, to flip it, you don't have to have Decayed. Like, it's just creature tokens.
Right.
So
it could be tokens from your Young Pyromancer or your Saheeli that you already have at the time that when you cast this.
Yeah. And flipping it, also, it's not targeting, like, Decayed. It's just creature tokens get big.
Right.
So I think it's kind of neat from that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it gets there for me generally, just because, like, I've got better options.
Right. You have better options. I can't really justify running Saheeli or Young Pyromancer. Weirdly enough, Innistrad sets have always had, like, those big payoffs, like Mercurial Geists and stuff, where you get things that get big based off of how many instants and sorceries you have in your graveyard, but I've never really had the token generator. So I've got the token generator now, which is cool.
Yeah.
I also... This is going to be my weird side tangent where I drop a hot take and I say, I don't think Decayed is as bad as everyone says it is.
Okay.
And I will defend that statement. If you are thinking about Decayed tokens as typical tokens and creatures, yes, they are bad because they can't block and they can only attack once. However, they are very, very easy to make.
Yeah.
They come at a generally very efficient rate, so you get a lot of them. And I view them more as a resource than I view them as a creature. So there are cards like Poppet Stitcher, where if you've already amassed a bunch of Decayed tokens, okay, cool, I can just immediately kind of flip this, and now they're all 3/3s and they lose Decayed. That's nice. There are other cards in Midnight Hunt where you can, like, tap down a creature, or you can tap some creatures you control to, draw a card, or tap down a creature an opponent controls. Decayed creatures are great for that. They're great for exploit.
Yeah.
They're awesome if you have a cube where you have lots of morbid triggers, because it is a guaranteed way to trigger morbid.
Right. Yeah, that is true. It makes sense, and I can agree with you on that. I think most of us playing just general cubes don't have the full payoff suite kind of thing set up as, like, it's just going to happen. So when we see it, it's like, nah, it's just bad. But if you have a more themed cube that might be able to take advantage of this, it's worth re-evaluating and kind of ignoring the general expectation. Like, set that aside, focus on your individual cube, your format type thing. Okay, I think we can move on to a pretty easy one. We've got Consider, which is a single blue for an instant. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard, draw a card. I like it. It's another option from your Thought Scours, your Mental Notes. It's not really Ponder Preordain, but it's kind of in the same idea. It's just a good card in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an all-around solid card, especially in a cube where you have a lot of flashback and blue. It's very easy for this card in an environment like mine to basically say, draw a card and a half.
Right. And I do like the fact that, like, you get to look at it and make the decision of, like, oh, I actually really need that card, instead of, like, your thought scours that are like, no, you don't have it's gone, and you get the next card.
Yeah, that was always like the feel bad. Like if you're in like the self-milled delirium deck, you hit Thought Scour, and the first card you flip is your Emrakul. It's just like, well, shit. I'm now going to spend the rest of the game trying to get that back before my opponent can eat it out of my graveyard.
Yeah, and I mean it's one of those, like, those cards are good enough in the right decks that, like, you just have to accept that the feel bads happen, but, like, statistically it's going to be better for you. But this one does get around that of, like, it's not 2 cards that you're pitching into the graveyard. It's only 1, but, like, you still have the option of just taking that card.
Right.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
I think we can move on to...
Up next, we've got Memory Deluge. Memory Deluge is 2 blue for an instant. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast the spell. Put 2 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Also has flashback for 5 blue.
Yeah.
So yeah, this card is basically, for me, just a way for the blue deck to dig for an answer.
And that's fair. I mean, basically every blue section needs the higher drop, look through more cards, card draw kind of thing.
And yeah, like, on its face value, 4 mana just to dig for the top 4 and grab 2. It's not
awful.
Spectacular. Yeah, it's not awful, but it's also not great.
Yeah.
You know, the flashback mode is expensive, but you're digging through the top 7 cards of your library, you know.
Her dig through time's pretty good.
Yeah, right?
I mean, it's not really a fair comparison because of how dig
no, because you're paying it for face value.
But it is one of those that, like, dig through time is a very strong effect. And if this is just sitting in your graveyard and you get up to that slow... Okay, I've got 7 mana. It's like, okay, yeah, I basically get to tutor forever I want at this point.
Right, and that's the other thing I like about this card, is generally any kind of graveyard recursion in my cube is like a real big plus. So this could be something that you mill away very early game, and then later on you've done a good job of slowing the deck down, or slowing the game down, but you're really looking for, like, either, you know...
You've got 1 win condition.
Right. You're looking for your Lab Man or your Jace that you haven't drawn yet. Yeah. And you've got 8 mana and you've got this sitting in your graveyard. Ah, cool. I can go probably find that.
Yep.
I don't think this would get there in a more generic cube. Because like you said, you have dig through time.
Yeah, I was like, we have the big... we've got dig through time, and, like, we've got factor fiction for, like, the 4 modes.
Right.
Like, so it's cool, but yeah, it makes more sense for you that this works out well.
Yeah.
We can move on to a pretty quick one. We've got Infernal Grasp, 1 and a black for an instant, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Black kill spell.
Yeah, it's good.
Figure out if you want this one in addition to your other ones. Like,
yeah, spooky art gets there for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can move on to one that's a little bit more interesting to talk about, though.
Yeah. So we got another Decayed card. So next we have Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia. Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia is 1 and a black for a 1/1 legendary creature, human wizard. With, at the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed.
So first off, it's not Ophiomancer.
It is not Ophiomancer.
Please, don't compare it to that.
No.
Just not the same.
I like this card, but I love Ophiomancer.
Yeah.
And this card in no way plays anything remotely like Ophiomancer. The tokens can't block.
It's one of those, like, it kind of almost plays similar in the heavy aristocrat deck, but, like,
right,
that's the only place that it kind of sort of does.
Right. Every other deck, this is nowhere close.
No. That doesn't mean that it's a bad card, though.
No, it's not. I think it's a very niche card. So, like you said, I think this card is great in the really heavy aristocrat deck, because you're getting that creature that's very easy to get a death trigger off of.
Yeah.
If you're running things like Fireblade Artisan, or any of those kind of aristocrat cards that want you to sacrifice something on your upkeep, yeah, that decayed zombie, I'll kill that. I will have no regrets about that whatsoever.
Right. It does the loop, essentially, very well.
It does. I also run Champion of the Perished, so the zombie version of Champion of the Parish, which pumping out a zombie every turn, sweet. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, like, I'm sure that Jadar works pretty well in your environment, since you've said that, like, Decayed there's more benefit from Decayed in your environment. Like, It's not just a shitty token. It has a little bit more options and play patterns to it.
So what's interesting is this card is both better in my environment and at times a lot worse in my environment.
Because you'll have already Decayed.
Right. It's not guaranteed that you're always going to make the zombie, because you might have Decayed tokens from, like, your Poppet Stitcher or something else, and you might be holding on to those for something else, which at this point, it's a 2-mana 1/1. So...
Which is not good.
No. So this card is in this really unique situation where, at times, it can be really good at helping enable the Aristocrat deck, but there are other times where you're at the floor of it, and the floor of this card is just abysmally bad.
Okay. We can move on, though.
Up next, we have the Meathook Massacre. The Meathook Massacre is X/black for a legendary enchantment. When the Meathook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 1 life. This card was $1 million for a reason. It's extremely good.
It is pretty good. The fact that it has the drain from creatures dying on an enchantment is really cool.
Yes, I love this combination of pseudo board wipe, pseudo blood artist effect.
Yeah.
That's just a really cool effect to mash up. There are downsides to this card. It is a really inefficient board wipe. It's really good at killing small shit. I'm not sure how many control decks would really want this card if there are better board wipes available to them.
Yeah, if you're not restricted to what board wipes you have available in the cube, we're not here for the control deck. You should be playing actual board wipes, because you need to actually remove the whole board.
Right, and like something that's come up a lot when I've been playing like Constructed with this card is it's like my opponent plays Shieldred, and it's like I need to answer that, and this ain't the way to do it.
No.
Like I'm not going to get to 7 mana to kill Shieldred with Meathook Massacre. I really just wish I had a Damnation or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, in my head, I almost compare this more to something like a cheaper Massacre Worm that's harder to remove. That's kind of how I think about it. And it really excels in like that kind of deck where it's like, I don't care how many of my creatures die because I'm getting the value out of them dying.
Yeah.
You know? But this can come down a lot quicker than turn 6. And it's also a lot harder for your opponent to remove because it's an enchantment.
Right. And for all of those reasons, I think it is kind of a more difficult card to play if you don't have experience with it, but it is very powerful.
Yeah, and I will also readily admit, I've been playing this card in Constructed in my cube now for over a year. I always have to read it. I can never remember which side of the board a creature dying gains me life versus losing my opponent. I never remember. I always have to read. I can never keep it straight.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. But yeah, I like the Meathook Massacre. The $40 price tag, bit of a bummer. Not a huge fan of that.
A little bit.
But let's move on to Bloodthirsty Adversary. This is 1 in a red for a 2/2 vampire with haste. When Bloodthirsty Adversary enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 in a red any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on Bloodthirsty Adversary, then exile up to that many target instant and or sorcery cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana cost. This was a cool card and had seen some decent amount of hype, and it's failed basically completely.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like this card.
I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely not lived up to the hype or expectation to the point that, like, it's one of those, as a 2-drop, it's not good. Sometimes you'll play it because, 2-power haste is just what you need based on your hand and the board state and whatever, but, like, not really what we're looking for in the 5-drop mode. Honestly, been pretty mediocre. It sounds cool. It's one of those where it's like, oh, I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to be able to flashback some stuff for value. And like this thing sits around and it just doesn't play that way.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that's flexible, but it's underwhelming in any way that you can play it.
Yeah, so disappointing, but
yes,
that's okay. So we can move on to Falkenrath Pitfighter. This one's pretty easy. It's a single red mana for a 2/1 vampire warrior. You can pay 1 and a red, discard a card, sacrifice a vampire to draw 2 cards, activate only if an opponent lost life this turn. I mean, okay, it's a 1-drop with 2 power in red. That's like the bar that we have to get over kind of thing. Like you need a certain amount of those aggressive 1-drops in your red section to support aggro. We have a decent number of those nowadays where it's not, oh my god, I have to take every single one that I can think of. Like,
right.
We're just not at that point anymore. And even beyond that, we're to the point of like having enough 2-power 1-drop creatures that we can also fill in some more utility 1-drop creatures that are also like kind of helping out, but aren't full on aggro. And because of that, I'm not a huge fan of Falkenrath Pitfighter, just because like that ability, not really gonna get there for most of the time. Like you get to pick and choose which ones you want, so maybe this works out, but like generally, no. Maybe for you, Cavs, because it's a vampire.
I do get more value out of it for that reason, for sure. That ability is much less likely to be flavor text in my cube than a more normal cube.
Right.
I like this. I think there are still, even in my cube, I think there are red 1-drops that I like more.
Right.
Falkenrath Gorger. I think that's the one that almost everybody also used to run in their cube for an amount of time that had a paragraph of flavor text around vampire cards in your hand having madness. That's super relevant for me.
Yeah, but wasn't relevant to anybody else.
No.
It was like, well, it's 2 power and it doesn't have a downside, so...
Right. I like Insolent Neonate more than this card.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, it's solid. For me, this is a great 1-drop for me.
We can move on to... I have no idea what this card is.
This is another hot take card of mine.
Okay, let's see what it's got after testing.
We'll see how well I can defend this.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, we have Lunar Frenzy. Lunar Frenzy is X and a red for an instant, with target creature you control gets +X/+O and gains first strike and trample until end of turn.
Cool.
Okay. Let me defend this.
Yeah.
I jammed Midnight Hunt draft when it was on Arena.
Shocking.
I know, right?
Never would have thought you would have done that.
I know. It's very unlike me.
Yeah.
Early on into me playing and learning that format, I kept losing to this card over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It quickly became a card that any deck I was playing against that could produce red mana, I had to play with this card is potentially in their hand, and I have to play around it. Because this card, I swear, is a lot better than it reads.
Yeah.
I think the natural inclination is to look at this and think, oh, it's Fireball. Fireball kind of sucks. It's not just Fireball. It's a Fireball that gets added on top of whatever power the creature you're casting it on has already. Which, it has the downside that every combat trick does, that if you play it poorly, you can get blown out if your opponent removes the creature. But assuming that you're a competent Magic player that's not going to pay 5 mana, or not going to pour 5 mana into this card when you're playing against a control deck that has, 4 mana and 3 cards in hand. This is a card that can really surprise you and end the game in very unexpected ways. Even the 1 mana mode of just giving something first strike and trample can be used to remove a blocker. I would maybe push a Peasant Cuber to consider it.
Okay, yeah, it's uncommon, so...
Right.
And they do generally have more options and abilities to play around with these types of effects.
Right, and one of the things I love about playing the card Daze is the first time I get my opponent with Daze, they are going to play around that card every other match I play against them, even if I sideboard the card out.
That's true.
It's going to have an impact on your opponent and how they're mentally kind of evaluating the board state.
Head.
Right. This card kind of has that going on, where like if you get your opponent with it, they're going to play around it, and they're going to suddenly start making weird blocks.
Yeah.
They're going to hold on to a kill spell in case you drop this later. Like, you're going to get into their head, and it's a card that you have to respect, because it is good enough where you have to have an answer if your opponent plays it. Like,
yeah.
I think that's kind of a sometimes under-evaluated aspect of cards like this.
And, I mean, First Strike and Trample is actually a very potent combination.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting. And I hate the fact that, like, you're selling this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe. And I'm like, no, bad. I've been burned by this kind of shit enough. Don't do it. Like, don't let him convince you to run it. Brad will make fun of you when he gets back.
I was going to say, I want to come back on the show. Don't take this and be like, hey, Brad, you should play this, because no, Brad should not play this. But like, Spoody, if you're listening, consider this.
Yeah, it is a pretty powerful effect. Moving on, we can talk about playing with fire. So, play with fire is a single red for an instant. Play with fire deals 2 damage to any target. If a player is dealt damage this way, scry 1. Cool, it's shock.
But better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say that I'm excited by it, but cool.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing, but I do like it. I cube it. I've played it in Constructed. Something that's kind of nice about it is if I'm in like a mono red deck and I have like kind of a sketchy opening hand and I got 1 or 2 of these in my hand, which you're not going to have 2 in cube.
Generally, no, but
the scry part makes me feel like, maybe I can dig out of this. Maybe I can dig to the land I need. I don't know if that's selling it, because I'm pretty sure that's just bad Magic playing. I'm pretty sure I should mulligan in that situation.
Dude, I've kept so many hands that I'm like, this was dumb, and I'll do it again.
Yes. Oh yeah, I've had plenty of those games where I'm like, turn 1, mountain, play with fire. That's not my second mountain. I'll scry that to the bottom. And then I draw another 3-drop, and I'm like, well, concede.
The great thing is that, like, I've done enough of those types of plays where it's like, even if I get what I needed, I'm still like, that was dumb.
Oh yeah.
That was super dumb. I should not have done that. I should have been punished. But this is the reason that I'm going to do it again.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, play with fires, it's another shock with a little bit of upside. You'll know if you need another of these types of things.
Yes.
So there was some talk, similarly with play with fire, was Fading Hope, and that's a single blue for an instant. Return target creature to its owner's hand. If its mana value is 3 or less, scry 1. So there was one of these like, hey, yeah, they're not the most flashy, but they both play well in that blue-red tempo spellsy deck.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to push that and you're interested in play with fire, then maybe take a look at Fading Hope. Similarly, if you were like, hey, Fading Hope's kind of neat, well, take a look at play with fire. You might be interested in both of them.
Yeah, I really like both of these cards.
Next up, we've got Augur of Autumn. This is 1 green for a 2/3 human druid. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands from the top of your library. It also has Coven. As long as you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. I haven't actually been able to get testing with this, which is super disappointing. But I had a couple emails that people talked about like, hey, Augur of Autumn does exactly what it says. It's in the same tier as Courser.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're interested in that and you want a second copy of that type of effect, that type of deck construction, Augur of Autumn will do exactly what you want. And there was talk about like the Coven isn't actually that difficult to get.
No, it's quite easy.
Generally, I look at these things and I'm just like, okay, yeah, whatever. Flavor ability that I don't care about. But apparently it's not that difficult to do.
That is something I am very much learning, is that I think I really underrated Coven.
Yeah.
It's fairly easy to have it turned on in a lot of situations.
And I think it is one of those that the more that you're able to play in like green and white, you're just going to have creatures at the different mana values as you're going up the curve are just going to have different power and toughness. And so like Coven looking for, 3 different creatures with different power, like that's not that difficult because you've got one here, and then you
Right.
probably have an elf. Cool. Now
Yep.
you just need something that's not a 1 or a 2. Yeah, I'm super excited, and I can't wait till I can actually like put that whole thing together and it actually go in the right deck.
I'll say I slept on this card when I added Midnight Hunt to my cube. I initially didn't include it. I've been playing this card more in Constructed recently, and I am very much coming around to it. What's great about this card is it's like when you have Coven turned on, like I've lost track of how many times it's like, all right, top of my library is a land, play that. Ooh, creature, play that. You know,
Yeah.
like it can. You're not just doing it once a turn. Like you can dig with this card.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay, I think we've got Huntmaster of the Fells, but not.
Yeah. So, well, actually, this is Grave Titan in green, Eric. Didn't you read the card?
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Up next, we've got Tovolars Huntmaster. Tovolars Huntmaster is 4 green for a 6/6 human werewolf. With when Tovolars Huntmaster enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. This is the daybound side. There is also a nightbound side. The nightbound side is Tovolars Pack Leader. Tovolars Pack Leader is a 7/7 werewolf with whenever Tovolars Pack Leader enters the battlefield or attacks, create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. It also has 2 green. Another target wolf or werewolf you control fights target creature you don't control. So, same disclaimer as every werewolf I have read prior on this episode. I'm going to be seeing this a little bit more at the ceiling because I will be more likely to be casting this on turn 6 to get Tovolars Pack Leader rather than Tovolars Huntmaster.
Which, I mean, you say that and it's like Tovolars Huntmaster is already actually pretty solid.
Yeah, it's already a pretty solid card.
Like, we play it, so...
Yeah.
I'm not the most excited by us playing it, but it's still good enough that I'm not like, holy shit, it's bad.
No, because, I mean, Tovolars Huntmaster, you're getting 10 power and toughness spread out over 3 bodies.
Yeah, it actually works out pretty well, so...
Yeah, that's not a bad floor. You know, Pack Leader, you're getting 11, but you're also potentially making more wolves, and then you've got that fight ability, which sadly has the word another in it, because I really wish I could have the Pack Leader attack things, but I totally understand why I can't.
Yeah.
That would probably be a little bit too much if I can actually have the 7/7 attack, or fight things.
I feel like it'd probably be okay, but sure.
I always like when a werewolf card has a decent activated ability on it because it lets me do something with my mana. I can keep it being night. You know, by this point, like, okay, I can cast a 2-drop and I can also do this fight thing. And I'm not flipping everything back to the day side of things. Like, I always appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this seems very good in your cube, and it's honestly just a solid cube option.
Yeah.
I've got one more I want to finish up. This is more like a shout out kind of thing, but Arlinn, the Pack's Hope, is 2 red-green for a Planeswalker with 4 starting loyalty. She has Daybound, she has +1 until your next turn you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. She has a -3, create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. The Nightbound side is Arlinn the Moon's Fury with 4 starting loyalty, +2, add red-green, and a 0. Until end of turn, Arlinn the Moon's Fury becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste. So the thing that interests me is Arlinn the Pack's Hope's +1 is until your next turn, creatures entering with an additional +1/+1 counter. So it helps the combo, you know, the +1/+1 combo deck, and it helps it moving into Naya. So it's not just green-white, you can have some red support. And it kind of helps the splash for Murderous Redcap. So like you're not really taxing the mana quite as badly because you're playing other red spells. So it's just one of those that like, not for every cube, not even for every cube that's enabling that combo, but you should take a look at it. It works well in that deck if you are looking to branch it out a little bit.
Right.
With that said, I'm pretty sure that's not why you like it.
I like that +1 on the Daybound side for a very different reason. It's the word flash.
Ah, yeah.
Yes. So I like that the Daybound side of Arlinn basically sets you up to take a turn off, make day into night, and then you cast all your werewolves on your opponent's turn. on the night side. So
Right.
it kind of helps enable the deck make day into night in a way where you still get to take your turn. You're just doing it on your opponent's turn.
Yeah, you're not fully taking time off and doing nothing.
Right.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also kind of the more side case where there will be times where you'll be casting this on turn 4. It's already night, so she's coming in on the nightbound side, and she's just a 5/5 trample indestructible haste for 4 mana.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those that, like, honestly, the Planeswalker itself, as a package, not bad. It makes tokens, it has the mana, like, it all kind of works together well enough. So, interesting card. But we have one more card that you're going to end on. We're into the commander of this set.
Yes. So this is my sleeper pick for a card that I had to cut to power that I was shocked I had to cut to power.
Interesting.
So, final card, we have Leinore Autumn Sovereign. Leinore Autumn Sovereign is 2 green-white for a 0/4 legendary creature, human noble, with Coven. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. Then, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. So, important distinction. Even though this card says Coven, you are adding the +1/+1 counter every turn, regardless of if you have Coven or not.
And it's at the beginning of combat.
Yes.
So it's not even like, oh, you have to delay it forever. It's like, no. You played this 4-drop and you're getting something out of it unless they immediately kill it.
Right. So going back to what I was saying when we were talking about Augur of Autumn, Coven has been surprisingly easy to turn on. So this card, very often, you're playing it on turn 4. You're pretty much, I don't want to say guaranteed to have Coven, but if you have 2 other creatures at the time that you cast this, you're going to have Coven.
Yeah.
Because she's a 0/4. I doubt you're going to have another 0-power creature on the board at this point in time.
Unlikely.
Yeah. And then you're putting a +1/+1 counter on one of your other 2 creatures. You will probably set that up to where you will have Coven, and you will immediately draw a card too.
Yeah. And even if you had another 0 power, as long as the third one isn't 1.
Yeah.
It's just
got it.
It's just so difficult. The floor to getting that draw card is have 3 creatures, basically.
Yeah. Which
you should be able to figure out how to get the draw card from 3 creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's green-white. You play creatures in those decks.
Yeah. My experience with this card is that it just fucking destroyed me. This card, probably, I think I saw it draw 7 or 8 cards over the course of 2 matches. It's super easy to have Coven turned on. And it's a really awkward card to deal with because if I have removal in my hand, I have to deal with whatever creature Leinore has been pumping that's actually killing me.
Yeah.
So I need a kill spell for that. But then I need a kill spell for her because she's just going to immediately create another threat that I have to deal with immediately. And she's continually drawing into cards that can easily become that next threat.
Right.
And because of the card draw, it's increasingly making it harder for me to turn Coven off for my opponent. Because presumably she will be drawing other creatures that will be making it even more complicated and difficult for me to shut Coven off.
Yeah, it really is one of those weird snowball kind of cards.
Absolutely.
But in a sort of different take on it, where it's not it's just becoming scary on its own. It's no, it's making your board position and potential board position pretty scary. I actually really like it, and the more you talk about it, the more I am actually potentially interested in trying this out. Leonore's kind of neat.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me how good this card was.
Yeah, you have to kill Leinore and then just accept that if you don't have another kill spell, you're getting punched for whatever the biggest thing is.
Right.
And it's also tough because honestly, in these types of decks, it's not uncommon for you to use your current removal spell on their 3-drop because it's that's a scary 3-drop that I need to answer.
Right.
And yeah, you fucked up.
Yeah. And it's drawing cards too.
Yeah.
So if you want to answer it efficiently, you have to kill it the moment that Coven trigger goes on the stack.
Yeah, basically. Or it's replacing itself and
Right.
honestly, I could see this being very problematic for your format because of white, and it's already a problem.
Right.
I don't think that would be the case. Like, I don't think it's going to be too strong for general cubes. Like, that's not where I'm going with it.
No.
But it might be good enough, honestly. You've convinced me that it's an interesting enough card that I wouldn't be against testing it, with the expectation that, like, yeah, it's probably not an all-star.
No.
But it could have some fun play patterns. And that's so important to me for the green-white decks. Like, those decks are so fucking boring. They really are. Like, the +1/+1 counter combo is the only reason anybody drafts those decks.
Mm-hmm.
At least for us. Because, like, fuck me, is White Weenie boring. And I'm the guy that plays, like, red aggro decks. Like, even me, I look at White Weenie and I'm like, yeah, sure, it's good, I guess. I don't want to play it, though. So any spice I'm interested in.
Yeah. Also, probably worth mentioning, 4 toughness. It's really hard for red to deal with.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
I'm bringing this one up because of all the cards I tested from both of these sets. This was the one that surprised me the most. This card was an absolute beating to play against, and I did not expect that at all.
That kind of rounds us off now.
Yeah.
Overall, Midnight Hunt, not bad.
No, I like Midnight Hunt a lot. On kind of the scale of all the Innistrad sets, that's pretty close to the top of my list. It's not the top, but it's top 3.
Yeah, it was cool, man. I'm glad to have done this postmortem with you. And
yeah, it's always fun to come on. You guys are fun to talk to.
Well, thanks. But with that, I guess we can head to the outro.
Yeah.